So here are 8 essential questions with regards to Teo. Question number 1. Is Teofimo's loss to Shakur a sign of decline or simply a lesson he can correct in camp? Now, my first impression is that perhaps it's both. Perhaps it's a sign of decline, but that doesn't mean it's something that he can't correct in camp. I think Shakur Stevenson is an elite fighter with elite reflexes. So when I analyze the fight and I analyze the pedigree of Shakur, I don't think it's necessarily a sign of decline. I think it's more of a reflection of just how good or how great Shakur Stevenson is. So that's the first part. And Teofimo, when we see him against other boxers, he looks incredible. But he looked very ordinary against Shakur. But does that mean Teo's ordinary? Or is Shakur exceptional? At this point in time, I think Shakur is simply exceptional, or he was exceptional on that night. He was ready. Can he correct the mistake? Well, first, one has to identify the mistake. To me, the mistake was not making enough adjustments. It's almost like he boxed with a boxer, that didn't work, and then he was unable to make effective adjustments. He did do some things. He did a lot of feinting, but it wasn't effective feinting. He did some body work, but not enough body work. He changed southpaw to try and give a different angle on the backhand every now and then. He didn't do enough of that and wasn't innovative enough from that position. So there's definitely things that can be corrected in camp, but it's important that they actually identify what the problems are and implement the solutions. Now remember, there's a difference between Shakur and Rolly Romero. So this should be a different fight. In a sense, many would say that Teo is more technical than Rolly Romero. However, I think Rolly would probably disagree with those assertions. The second question is, what actually made Teo so effective against Lomachenko, and can he recreate that version of himself? Again, I spoke about this earlier. It's so important that he returns to that type of form. Were there certain variables? I think the variables was an element of surprise and that Lomachenko is a slow starter. So I think that's a part of it. But at the end of the day, he beat a great fighter. He beat an elite fighter over 12 rounds. And if he can replicate the adjustments, if he can replicate the speed, the timing, the boxing intelligence, then that version of Teo is very difficult to beat. So yes, you can argue that maybe Lomachenko underestimated Teo, but we should never minimize the greatness of that performance. And like I said, he was great that night, but can he be great again? And that's a great question. And I think part of that question, the answer to that question is going to be, part of answering that question is whether he can be consistent and whether his camp can create an optimal boxing environment. And I think it's possible, but I think it's going to take a tremendous amount of dedication from Teo. And I think his team are going to have to be on their A game to be able to recreate that version. Also, there's the hunger. What is Teo's hunger from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100? When he fought Lomachenko, his hunger was probably at 100. Where is it now? Is it 70? Is it 60? Or is it 80? And if it is at a 60 or a 70, can he push the scale to get it to 80, 90, or back to 100? Because there's all these variables that need to be optimum for him to recreate that form. Question number 3, does walking towards difficult fights make Teo a real fighter even when the results go against him? I think the answer to that is yes, because I think many great fighters will just simply fight anyone. And I think that's a recipe of many great fighters. So, and that's something that stands out about Teo, is that he's not avoiding challenges. And that's a great trait. And that's something that we like to see in fighters. Question number 4, can a trainer criticize a fighter effectively, or should the corner always prioritize solutions? That's such a good question. A trainer needs to understand the psychology of their fighter. If criticizing your fighter makes your fighter more optimum, then you should criticize. If simply pointing out solutions optimizes your fighter, then you should simply do that. In simple terms, you might have a fighter that negates the jab, and he's negating the jab because he's emotionally invested and he's making that simple mistake. And then you could just say to him, look, you need to pick up your jab. And if he follows that instruction, and if that's the right instruction, then that can have a significant impact on the fight. Maybe he needs to throw more feints to be able to land the backhand, etc. But with other fighters, it may not be a technical issue. It may be an emotional issue. So how do you emotionally get them to a point where they can operate at an optimum level? The point is this: it's a case by case basis. And I guess the role of a trainer is to understand the psychology of the fighter, because part of your job is to bring the best out of the fighter. Question number 5, can trust survive in a father-trainer relationship without accountability? I think it's hard to have any trust if there's no accountability. And it would seem, on camera at least, that the father, and I say this respectively because he obviously has expertise in boxing and he's done a great job with his son, but it seems like this is an avenue where he has struggled. And hopefully he can gain perspective and insight into this, because if he struggles with accountability and he's still involved with the boxing of his son, then this can not only affect the son's boxing, it can also affect their relationships. Hopefully he can work on that. Question 6, does Teo need to separate his father from the coaching role to protect both his career and his relationship? I personally think that, considering that his father got him to an elite level, that I think that the way to move forward would be maybe to do like a collaboration with another talented trainer. And that trainer not only needs to know boxing, but they also need to be able to communicate concisely, and they need to respect the role of the father. So you need a trainer who has a wealth of experience in not only dealing with fighters, but also dealing with other trainers. And you need someone who can communicate with respect, who can communicate honestly, who can give constructive feedback, and someone that's at the same time having all those elements, someone who's also a strong character. So it's a difficult job, but I think it's essential. I think adding a co-trainer would be beneficial, because what happens, I think, I think Evander Holyfield's a good example. When he fought Tyson, he had Don Turner and he had Tommy Brooks, and they were both were good trainers individually, but then when you combine them both together, you get the benefit of both worlds. And I think Teo could benefit from that. But it's important that the trainers collaborate effectively. So question number 7, would adding a technical co-trainer give Teo the structure and clarity he currently lacks? Well, when we talk about the structure and clarity that he lacks, it appeared that he lacked structure and clarity against Shakur Stevenson. It does not necessarily mean that he always lacked structure and clarity, because he had structure and clarity against Lomachenko. So this could be an isolated incident, but it's important that if an external person comes in and collaborates with the father, that he attempts to bring the structure and clarity back into the camp. And finally, question 8, is Teo's biggest problem technical, psychological, or the system around him? Probably a combination of all of those things. But first of all, Teo is a very good technical fighter. So any adjustments, it's just about improving the boxing ring IQ. So from 1 to 100, let's say when he's optimum, he's like a 90. But against Shakur, he seemed to be like a 70 and an 80. So it's about getting him back to where he was with regards to his technical skills, and with regards to making adjustments when things are going wrong. And that can be corrected in preparation. Though it's a hard thing to do. It's something that's easy to say, but harder in implementation. Psychologically, that's an interesting one. First off, it's important that a fighter understands their psychology. That's the first thing, because you have to understand your psychology, I think, before you can improve it. And of course, your team and your trainers, they should be aids for you to improve your psychology. And if your camp is optimal, your psychology should be improving from week to week. And if the premise that his father is the system, if that's the true premise, then I think that needs to be adjusted accordingly. He needs to have systems. It can't be one person doing everything. You need elite professionals operating at different levels. So you'll have someone who is great at nutrition doing the diet. You have someone who's optimum and great at strength conditioning doing the strength conditioning. You have, a great professional with the right certifications and the right experience who's the sports psychologist. So I think if you change the systems things effectively, then you could bring out a different fighter. That could be the one change that could bring the best version of Teofimo Lopez. Quick announcement. I have a free chapter from my boxing book. So click the link below to visit the landing page and get your free chapter. Remember to check your spam/junk folder if you don't receive it. Also, let me know what you think. Constructive feedback is always welcome.